Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're just going to wait a minute or two for us to reach a critical mass of folks who have entered. Sit tight, and we will be with you in just 1 second. Thanks so much for attending. All right, why don't we get started? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are so excited for you to be with us today. My name is Tom Fazzini. I am the Communications Director of the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that works across the region to protect our most precious resource, which is the fresh, clean, and natural waters of the Great Lakes. It's that time of year, at the beginning of the year, when people set resolutions or some people set intentions for the new year. And one of the most popular is some form of giving back to your community, maybe volunteering more, maybe getting involved. So we are so excited today to offer this opportunity for you to learn more about joining us in our work to protect the Great Lakes, as well as some of the major issues facing the lakes in 2025. We really are honored that you are considering spending your time, energy, and resources with the Alliance in the new year, so thank you in advance. Today, we are joined by two members of our team. Cristal Ramirez serves as our volunteer coordinator. She is a source of support and communications for our volunteers, uh, both returning and new, to ensure they are empowered to engage on Great Lakes issues. Cristal broadens the Alliance's presence in the Great Lakes area by participating in Adopt a Beach cleanups all across the region and in other community activities. We'll also be hearing today from Joel Bromeyer. He is the president and CEO of the Alliance, where he leads a team of professionals across the region and our permanent presence in Washington, D.C., along with a base of more than 15,000 volunteers, all dedicated to protecting clean water and building a sustainable future for the Great Lakes. So today, Cristal will lead us through some background of the Alliance and ways to get involved. And Joel will speak about the issues we'll be working on in 2025. We want this to be as informative for you as possible. Then we're going to open it up to your questions. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can use that function to ask questions. We will do our best to get to as many of those questions as possible so that your questions are answered and you are prepared to help join us and make a difference. So with that, I am excited to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would also like to take the time to thank you for joining us to learn about all the ways you can get involved and support the work at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. Um, ooh, sorry, I wanted to preface this a little bit, but yeah, as y'all saw from the invite, we're going to go over all the ways that you can support our work, whether you are at the westernmost point of the Great Lakes region, in near Lake Superior, or the eastern tip of Lake Ontario, or anywhere in between. There are ways that you can get involved in our work and also promote the well-being of the Great Lakes within your own community. So thank you for joining us. So a quick overview about what we're going to cover in this webinar. So Tom did a great preface and intro to the Alliance. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on that for folks that are new. And then I'm going to share briefly the importance of the Great Lakes. I will hand things over to Joel to talk about issues affecting the Great Lakes. And then lastly, I will go over all the ways you can get involved in Alliance, whether that is through our volunteer programs or different kinds of online actions, which I will share about. I'm excited to share about share them with you today. And now for a lovely staff photo. So these are just some of the folks that work at the Alliance. In a nutshell, like Tom said, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit headquartered in Chicago, but we do work to protect all 5 Great Lakes in all 8 Great Lakes states. And we do have staff based in Chicago, Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, and DC. And so everything we do at the Alliance is done with pretty much 2 overall goals in mind. Firstly, we believe that clean, affordable drinking water is a human right, and communities that rely on the Great Lakes should have access to them as a source of sustenance and recreation. And that can take a lot of different forms. And we also believe that Great Lakes communities should be heard and involved in decisions that will impact them. And so how do we work towards these goals? So the Alliance connects and empowers people to advocate, give back, and take action to protect the Great Lakes. And we accomplish this with three connected approaches. First, through advocacy and leadership. Some of our staff work at different levels of government to advocate for policies that protect and promote the well-being of the Great Lakes. Some issues on our radar, which I'll let Joel elaborate on momentarily, is combating invasive species, promoting sustainable water management, addressing pollution sources, and our staff, along work with other organizations, businesses, government entities to amplify the impact we have to tackle large scale issues that require coordinated efforts. I am so sorry. I was trying to scroll down. All right. So we also take approach protecting the Great Lakes through education and action. And so we conduct educational programming, very similar to this webinar. We host workshops, webinars, trainings that cover Great Lakes issues throughout the year. And our staff encourages and facilitates direct action to protect the Great Lakes. And that's kind of where I come in. So this would include hands-on involvement, like our Adopt a Beach program, our ambassadors program, which I will talk about later on in this presentation. And there's also many forms of online advocacy, which definitely picked up post-pandemic. And yeah, I want to take this time to say a huge thank you to our volunteers. We would not be able to do this work without you. And then all these steps kind of go together, but from the direct action and from the data that our volunteers collect, we're able to develop and produce educational materials such as guides, toolkits, and reports to support learning and action. And these resources, which I'll share with you momentarily, are available online on our website for free, and they are meant to be accessible to a broad audience, including educators, community leaders, and policymakers. So I'm sure that everyone on this call would agree that the Great Lakes are important, but in case you're not convinced, let me give you a couple of facts. So in case, I mean, this is something that takes a little bit to wrap your head around, but the Great Lakes is the largest source of fresh water in the world. 97% of the world's water is salt water, which means there's 3% remaining, and 2% of that is frozen in glaciers, leaving 1% of fresh water available to life. And a fifth of that is located within all 5 of the Great Lakes. And so this source of fresh water provides drinking water to over 40 million people between the US and Canada. And also in terms of economic support, it powers regional industries, including fishing, agriculture, tourism, and provides support for millions of jobs. So there's a number of reasons why the Great Lakes are important to humans, but also besides a lot of human life, the Great Lakes supports 3,500 species of plants and animals. So that's a lot. That's a lot of life. So now, for issues impacting the Great Lakes, I will hand things over to Joel.
Thanks, Crystal, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks again for joining today. I appreciate having so many supporters and old and new on the call on the webinar. I'm Joel Bromeyer, I'm president of the Alliance, and a huge part of what makes our organization go are people who are willing to take action for the Great Lakes in their own lives. So it's good to have you all here today. In about less than 10 minutes, I'm going to try to talk a bit about some of the major issues that affect the Great Lakes. And there will be an opportunity later for Q&A, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions about, or there may be lots of questions about specific policies and specific issues. we'll do our best to answer those. I know that in these brief comments, I'm not going to cover everything you want to hear, but please have your questions ready and we'll try to get to them later on. So can we have the next slide, please? So I wanted to start just by laying the groundwork of what the Great Lakes, sort of that legacy of the Great Lakes used to look like. Very famous pictures of rivers catching on fire. And, this is a picture of Indiana Harbor in Northwest Indiana, where there's near a refinery and a number of steel mills. A lot of these images are emblematic of what we call point source pollution. So this is pollution that enters the Great Lakes through pipes, basically, often from in an industrial facility or a municipal facility, a sewage treatment plant, something like that. This kind of pollution is highly regulated under what's called the Clean Water Act, a federal law that sets tight numeric standards for how much of this type of pollution is allowed to enter our Great Lakes. And so while it's not to say that it is not a problem, because there are always permit violations and bad things that happen as a result, point source pollution from those pipes is very tightly controlled and has been for a number of decades, which has largely contributed to the cleanup of huge parts of the Great Lakes. Can we have the next slide, please? Another kind of pollution that is treated very differently under the Clean Water Act is called non-point source pollution. And so, as I said in my comments on the previous slide, point sources are, there's some fancy words here, pollution in a discrete conveyance like a pipe. So a wastewater treatment plant, an oil refinery, a paper mill, a steel mill, those are all examples of point sources that discharge pollution into our Great Lakes. Non-point sources are diffuse pollution. So this is pollution that starts with rain falling out of the sky and hitting the ground, hitting the soil, hitting the street, hitting the land, and carrying with it pollutants that eventually find their way into our rivers, our inland lakes, our groundwater, and eventually the Great Lakes themselves. And so these are things like row crop farms, concentrated animal feeding operations, streets, lawns, and gardens, septic systems, all are examples of this kind of non-point pollution. And in the Great Lakes, the one that we're most concerned about is agricultural pollution. And so this is a big area of focus for the Alliance, and one of our big efforts, especially at the state level, to get the states to regulate and incentivize different actions to stop agricultural pollution from getting into our waters. The reason we spend a lot of time on that, you can see in the top left corner, the result of all this agricultural pollution are toxic algae blooms. And these are blooms of tiny plants. Actually, they're tiny bacteria that can overwhelm places like Western Lake Erie in Ohio and Michigan, and Saginaw Bay in Michigan, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, and lots of other places across the Great Lakes. And these tiny blue-green algae actually can produce toxic byproducts to the point that it makes water unsafe and toxic to be in for plants and even people. It even shut down the city of Toledo's entire drinking water system for more than 2 days in 2014. So non-point source pollution is very underregulated in the Great Lakes, and it's an area that we're really focused on for improving both regulations and funding. Next slide, please. Another form of often largely non-point source pollution is plastics, one that I know a lot of people on this webinar are probably very familiar with. According to the Rochester Institute of Technology, more than 22 million pounds of plastic is entering the Great Lakes every year. In some places, the concentration of plastics in the Great Lakes is actually higher than the famous Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And a big difference between ocean plastic and Great Lakes plastic is that Great Lakes plastic tends to be in very tiny particles. So microplastics or even nanoplastics that are small enough that they're not being removed by sewage treatment or drinking water treatment and are showing up in manufactured products like bottled water, soda, beer, canned food items. Anything that uses Great Lakes water for processing is actually having plastic particles showing up in it. And you can click, I know there's one little factoid here, click to the next slide, the weight of 2,316 African elephants, just to give you a sense of how much plastic is going into our water every year. Our concern here is that plastic is being mistaken for food by Fish and Wildlife, but it's also getting into our bodies and our communities. We actually have, there's a growing body of research, some of which is actually being generated right here in the Great Lakes region, showing how tiny plastic particles are moving through the human body in ways that we didn't understand not even 10 years ago, with health impacts that are only just starting to become clear. Next slide, please. Another topic of great concern to us and to lots of people in the Great Lakes is invasive species. Invasive species are critters that don't belong here. They're from a different part of the world, and they've entered the Great Lakes or are threatening to enter the Great Lakes and disrupt our food web. Invasive species tend to be critters that are very efficient at eating and breeding, and so they can take over ecosystems and push out a lot of the native species that we care about. They've primarily gotten into the Great Lakes in two ways. On the left, you see an example of an ocean-going ship where invasive species have been brought in the ballast water of those kinds of ships. On the right, that's a picture of jumping silver carp in the Illinois River Basin that are moving towards Lake Michigan and threatening to enter through the Chicago Canal system. The good news is that there are major programs and construction projects in place to address both of these sources of invasive species, and we're going to be watching that and pushing on those areas very closely at the federal level during 2025. Next slide. Of course, the Great Lakes are, I think probably for everybody or almost everybody, if not everyone on this webinar, they are your source of drinking water. And they are a way that we get rid of the waste that our communities produce. And so for drinking water, it's imperative that we make sure that everybody in the Great Lakes Basin can have that most basic thing, safe and clean and affordable drinking water in their homes, in their businesses. So everybody in the Great Lakes is part of that promise of safe and clean water that we all rely on. That's just a critical basic we've got to get right. We also know that our wastewater and stormwater systems are really being taxed more and more by the impacts of extreme rainfall and climate change. And so our wastewater systems and our wastewater infrastructure often across the region, both in urban and rural areas, is not up to the task of keeping our surface waters clean and keeping our property and our health from being damaged by exposure to wastewater. And so making sure that we're continuing to invest at the level of need in both our drinking water and our wastewater systems is critical. This is an area that over the last 4 years, under the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's been basically a sea change in how the restoration of our water infrastructure has been happening in the Great Lakes Basin. And it's something we're going to want to see continue into 2025 and beyond. Next slide. The last topic I'm going to talk about specifically is water use. And I know this is one that's on a lot of people's minds as we look out west and we see intermittent periods of drought. We see some of the sort of really terrible and tragic events that are unfolding in Southern California right now. And it brings to mind these questions of how will our country address its water supply needs, in the coming decades. Here in the Great Lakes, this the colored area on your map here represents the Great Lakes watershed. And this is the area in which when the rain falls on the ground, the water eventually flows into the lakes. Within this area in the US and Canada, the diversion of our water away from the Great Lakes is actually banned with very limited exceptions. And even under those exceptions, any of the water that gets used outside of the region has to be returned to the Great Lakes after it's used. So we are pretty well protected from water exports here in the Great Lakes. There's another pressure on our water supply, though, and that is the growing push of increased large-scale water use within the Great Lakes. So for things like different, more modern types of manufacturing, like IT manufacturing, data center management, changing patterns of agriculture. And so another area that's really important to pay attention to is how some of these larger water movements in the region may or may not affect the health and vitality of the Great Lakes. And that's something, again, that we're going to be spending more time on in 2025 and beyond. With that, I think I'm going to let Crystal take over again so we can get through some of our volunteer opportunities. I'll come back in a minute to talk about some of our policy advocacy actions. And thanks again for being here today.
Thank you, Joel. Awesome. Well, now to the meat of the presentation, all the ways to get involved with the Alliance. So first up is I would describe as our longest running and most substantial volunteer program, Adopt a Beach. And so for folks that are newer to our organization, um, basically Adopt a Beach is our volunteer program that has been going on for 30 years. That initially started off as part of International Coastal Cleanup in September, led by Ocean Conservancy, which is one of our longtime partners, which organizes beach cleanups along the ocean shoreline. And so our program really focuses more on just the Great Lakes shoreline. And basically, this program has evolved now to be able to take place year round, where we have thousands of volunteers each season take part in our program in all 8 Great Lakes states across all 5 Great Lakes. Volunteers not only remove litter from our shorelines that could otherwise harm wildlife, as Joel mentioned, uh, and wildlife can confuse plastic and other litter items for food, and ends up unfortunately in our drinking water and ultimately in human bodies. But our volunteers not only remove that litter that could cause harm, but they also collect valuable data about what type of litter we're finding on the beach. And this data helps us learn more about our shorelines and helps us influence the conversation on plastic, uh, in particular, and other forms of litter on a regional and even national levels. And so I just want to share some milestones just from this decade. So in 2021, we celebrated our 30th anniversary of the Adopt a Beach program. And in 2022, our volunteers had reached the milestone of collecting 500,000 pounds of litter and removing them from Great Lakes shorelines. In 2023. That milestone was 20 years, having our volunteers collected 20 years of data, which I will elaborate more on shortly. And in 2024, our volunteers helped us collect 10 million pieces of litter. And so speaking of 2024, um, I wanted to highlight some of our Adopt a Beach milestones just from 2024. So we had 3 big firsts. 2024 was the first full Adopt a Beach season where our volunteers could collect litter data and team leaders could manage their cleanups entirely on their mobile devices. And this streamlined process, we hope, helps improve data collection and also ease of cleanup management. And so I want to thank all of our volunteers who helped us test this tool, and we look forward to continuing to find ways to make this tool better and also continue to find ways to streamline our beach cleanups. And so, like I mentioned previously, in 2024, our volunteers had collectively removed 10 million pieces of litter. And yeah, I mean, this is really just to show that, this is very tangible data. And this not only helps keep our Great Lakes clean, but it also helps support policies that reduce plastic pollution. And actually, um, this all the data that we have been collecting for 20 years um, was compiled by our very own Olivia Rita from the Alliance for the Great Lakes to reflect what we've been finding along our Great Lakes shorelines for the past 20 years. And we're able to produce these resources because of our volunteers. This report in particular highlights, unfortunately, the overwhelming presence of plastic that we find along our shorelines. And this work has attracted national attention and is helping to strengthen plastic reducing policies. The collecting of this data has actually helped, and you can read more about this in the report, which is available online at that very short URL you see. But this data has been used to help bring forth a lot of plastic bans. So in 2018, there's actually a little blurb about this in the report. But this Adopt a Beach data was used to pass a ban on microbeads in Illinois in 2018. And I mean, that's just one of the ways that our um, data can be used, and different agencies and organizations and researchers continue to reach out to ask for this data. And again, we wouldn't be able to have compiled all this information without the help of our wonderful volunteers. So thank you. And so if this is a program you would like to partake in, then you don't need to necessarily lead a cleanup, but you can join one that has already been scheduled. But if you would like to lead your own cleanup, we have a lot of resources on how to do that. And you can lead a cleanup for, yeah, any number of, pockets of within your community. You can have your, work colleagues come out, your friends, a school group, a community group. And we have a whole page on our site with resources, including a how-to guide and a guide to guide you through every step of hosting a cleanup, as well as templates you can use to promote your event. And yeah, you're also able to create flyers. And we also host trainings, which I will touch briefly on momentarily. So 2025, what can you look forward to this year? So we are looking forward to continuing to improve our mobile litter collection and cleanup management tool. Um, and so, yeah, so this will be the second year that it's been in use. So yeah, if you haven't tried it out, please do so. Stay tuned for our team leader trainings. Our spring dates will be announced soon. And we are hoping to expand our presence and opportunities for engagement in Northwest Indiana, Northwest Michigan, and along the Lake Erie Basin. So if you're in those areas, make sure to stay tuned. And so, other opportunities to be part of the solution that happens yearly is our plastic free July campaign. So that's something to look forward to in the summer. But you can also feel free to take our plastic free pledge sooner, which I will also get into later. But also for 2025, we are going to be releasing our Spanish versions of our paper litter monitoring form, our team leader how-to guide, and participation waiver, which we piloted in 2024. Again, thanks to our lovely volunteers, and will be available on our website in 2025. So stay tuned for that. For things to mark on your calendar for the 2025 Adopt-A-Beach season, spring kickoff is April 25th to 27th. That's kind of when we really kick off our beach cleaning season, but folks are always ready to get started before that. And then we have another big event, September Adopt-A-Beach, which is like our big last final push for cleanups right before fall really starts to kick in. And like I said before, our team leader trainings for spring will be announced soon. But if you want to, go ahead and start learning about how to be a team leader, there's also training videos on on our team leader resources page. So awesome. And if Adopt-A-Beach, you're like, okay, you want to do something a little bit different, something a little bit more personal, we have the Alliance Ambassadors Program. So each year we have about 70 to 100 ambassadors who receive training to represent the Alliance for the Great Lakes at outreach events, both in person, online. I oversee the onboarding, but if you are interested in taking part of this program, you can reach out to me via email. And I will have this email up later as well. But basically, we'll set up an introductory call and I will give you a thorough rundown of the program. This program is available to anyone. No prior knowledge is needed because we will train you on all things Great Lakes. And so some examples of the kinds of opportunities where we ask our ambassadors to step in and represent the Alliance in their own communities will look like tabling, virtual in-person presentations, help with Adopt-A-Beach cleanups, other online actions, and other kinds of events. And I will say that the majority of the opportunities we offer are usually tabling and helping with presentations and other support with events. Ambassadors are spread out throughout the Great Lakes region, but the more people can get involved, the more folks we can have on the ground and the greater reach we can have. And our ambassadors not only engage in person, but also engage online to share a lot of our content. And so this is just a quick idea of like the kinds of events that our ambassadors attend. And as you can see, we have quite an array. We encourage our ambassadors to also source their own events, um, to let us know where where some alliance presence will benefit and be helpful, whether that is at a local volunteer or environmental fair, farmers markets, at a school. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can help out there. And so what do you get as an ambassador? Well, being an ambassador has a lot of perks, and some of those perks include, but are not limited to, getting access to ambassador only trainings and discussions throughout the year with Great Lakes experts. Um, Ambassadors are put into contact with like-minded individuals and are connected with other passionate Great Lakes advocates throughout the region. And it's also a great way to practice public speaking skills. And, swag is always a bonus, among other things. But you also get mailed copies of our watermarks, which is our Alliance print newsletter. And yeah, so if you are interested, please let me know. Um, and yeah, things to look forward to with the ambassadors program in 2025, things to expect. There will be skills-based training on how to best table and represent the Alliance and talk about Great Lakes issues. We're hoping to bring more of a variety of deep dive topics and speakers. And if you are in Northeast Wisconsin, Duluth, the Lake Erie Basin. We hope to expand our presence and opportunities for engagement in those areas. So keep a lookout. And we hope to have a greater amount of in-person and online opportunities, as well as resources to help you source your own events. And yeah, awesome. So I'm going to hand things over back to Joel to talk about the Alliance Action Center.
Sure. Thanks, Crystal. And I just want to emphasize that if you are interested in a particular issue like plastics or drinking water or invasive species, whatever it is, the ambassadors trainings are a great way to do a deep dive on those. We have a whole team of program and policy experts that are not on this webinar today, but do all that work to develop our policy advocacy. And it's a great way to go deep on a topic and learn more about a topic that's of interest to you. Both on the substance of the issue and also on the actions, the policy actions that need to be taken to address those issues. So I just want to put in a plug for that, and you'll have an opportunity to meet more staff at the Alliance if you do one of those trainings. We host an Alliance Action Center that's actually in the process of being updated right now. And I wanted to touch on this a bit because I know many of you are interested in the advocacy opportunities in 2025. We are going to be facing in 2025 a significant shift in both the White House and in Congress in a way that is going to be in some ways antagonistic to environmental regulation, and that's been a clear signal. There's also going to be a lot of opportunities to amplify the support for Great Lakes issues, both at the federal level, but also at the state level. Our Great Lakes states have been tremendous supporters in a variety of ways and on some of the issues that I mentioned today. And it's going to be critical that we are pushing states to both, produce good outcomes for the Great Lakes and encouraging them to advocate to Washington for the health of the Great Lakes and clean water over the next couple of years. At a time when we expect some of our clean water protections and funding to be under attack in DC. So that's something that we are going to be offering you lots of opportunities on. So particularly in particular areas I already know are coming are going to be areas like plastic pollution, invasive species prevention, maintaining the integrity of Great Lakes programs like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is the largest federal watershed restoration program in the country, and more. Those are just a few that come to mind right now. We'll be giving you, through our Action Center, opportunities to use our template communications to your elected officials, but also write your own and make it easy for you to contact the right offices in Washington to make sure that your representatives are getting your message. I know there can be a lot of skepticism about politics right now. I want to really emphasize that when members of Congress, any decision maker, mayors on up, but when members of Congress hear from individual people who live in their district who make it really clear how critical clean water is to you and how critical the Great Lakes are to you, it really does make a difference. 10 or 20 phone calls or letters from the district with real people behind them get noticed. In my prior work at the Alliance, before I ran the organization, I was the policy director. I've done a lot of this kind of government relations work in my time. And I just want to encourage everybody here not to get skeptical about outreach to your elected officials. Let them know what you hear. And we're going to try to make that as easy as possible as 2025 goes on. So I'll turn it back over to Crystal.
Thank you, Joel.
And then watch for the update of that page, which is coming soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Awesome. Speaking of staying up to date, here are all the ways you can stay updated with the Alliance. So if you are not already subscribed to our email list, please do so. Tell your friends. It's a great way to stay up to date with what we're doing at the Alliance. And if you are on social media, please feel free to connect with us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Here are our handles. Awesome. So far we've gone over all the ways you can volunteer, and yeah, why you should get involved. But maybe you're tight on time. Like everyone is everyone has a lot going on all the time. So, if you're short on time, here's some options for you to support our work. One way you can support the Alliance for the Great Lakes is by becoming a donor. If you feel at this time that, time-wise, you're at your capacity, you can always support us with a donation. And you can feel free to customize your donation to be a one-time thing, a monthly thing, or in honor of someone. You can also check on our site to see if your employer will match your donation. Feel free to check out greatlakes.org/donate. And now in terms of resources available on our website, so another thing you can do to support our work is to check in on our resources. All of the resources that I'm going to go over right now are free and available on our website. So for starters, our campaign page provides a brief overview of our federal priorities, as well as additional areas of focus. You can also check our news section and look through issue areas there. Here you will find more in-depth articles and info on a number of Great Lakes and water topics. And another recent resource that we actually put out last year was our 2024 election season and Great Lakes voter toolkit. And so, as a 501(c) nonprofit, what we're not going to tell you who to vote for, but instead, this toolkit is intended to help teach voters like yourselves on how to communicate with candidates about Great Lakes issues that you care about. And this could really be, this toolkit is intended to be a framework to discuss, can be used to discuss even other issues. And so this tool came together because our very own moderator, Tom Fazzini, helped write it, and was launched during a presidential election year. However, this is a very versatile resources that you can use to engage with your local officials, whose roles are equally vital in protecting our Great Lakes, and may even impact you far more directly. So yeah, feel free to check in this resource. It will continuously be updated. So check that out. Um, awesome. And as y'all know, one of our biggest focus areas has been plastic pollution. And so we also have a plastic-free Great Lakes toolkit. And basically, this toolkit has a lot of resources to make a difference in your community on plastic pollution. You can check it out, and you can also take a pledge to reduce your plastic consumption. We have made recent updates, so check it out if you have not. But basically, it's intended to help you reduce or eliminate your plastic usage. Now for educators, we actually have a Great Lakes curriculum that spans grades K through 12, which is also available for free on our website. And so Great Lakes curriculum includes lesson plans and many other educational resources. And it's called Great Lakes in My World. There's both indoor and outdoor activities that you can integrate into your classroom, and includes lesson plans, assessment rubrics, and even student journal pages. So if you know any educators, please share with them. In terms of, yeah, more online resources. So we're also on YouTube, actually. So if you're on YouTube, you can check out our channel where you can find previously recorded webinars, as well as other recorded online events, such as this one. This will end up on there. But you will also find our team leader training videos, which is a good way to get started if you're interested in being a team leader this season. Awesome. So I will end it there. Two takeaways I hope everyone is able to take away is that there's a variety of ways to support the Alliance for the Great Lakes. This is all totally up to your capacity. Feel free to mix and match. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us now, later, or anytime. And I will put my info for everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you so much. There are questions that are coming into the Q&A. As a reminder, if you did have any questions that came up during the presentation, pop them into the Q&A there, and we'll do our best to answer them. You can see actually that a lot of them have been answered over the course of the presentation, and you can see those responses in that Q&A box, and we will also try to answer some of those during this Q&A session right now. One of the first questions that came up a couple of times is, will this presentation be available? The answer is we will follow up after this call with an email that will have a link to a video of this presentation, which will be on our YouTube channel that Crystal mentioned just a second ago, as well as a link to the presentation so that you can identify and find those resources again. I've also included some links to those resources in the chat. We had a number of questions about policies, and then we also had some questions about some of the volunteer opportunities. I'm going to start with a policy question. Joel, we had a policy question about agriculture, and you had mentioned non-point source pollution versus point source pollution. And the question was about different types of farming, regenerative farming, for example, versus conventional farming. And in other words, if there's non-point solutions within agriculture that are more polluting than others, and therefore of more concern. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And this is front of mind for us because agricultural pollution is the primary cause of a lot of these algae bloom problems and other pollution issues, and it's so underregulated. Obviously within agriculture, there's a whole lot of different ways we grow food, and honestly, some of the agriculture we do is about doing things like that are not very efficient, like growing energy, actually converting some of that corn we grow to ethanol and things like that. So there's a whole variety of ways that we use land to create crops and animals that end up impacting our lakes. So regenerative agriculture, this sort of real emphasis on healthy soils and planting, for example, having something growing on the soil year round rather than having a row crop growing and having it sort of one and done and harvested, using cover crops, really with just an emphasis on how agriculture can pay multiple benefits, capturing carbon, keeping soil on the land, keeping chemicals on the land and nutrients on the land. There are ways you can do that in all different kinds of agriculture, right? And so whether you're talking about a small, a couple of 100-acre farm or a large industrial operation, we have technologies and practices that we know keep nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen on the ground and in the land rather than in our water. So and we also know that there are bad ways to do this, like spreading as much manure as possible on land just to get rid of it instead of allocating it based on the exact soil needs and then treating the rest of it like the waste that it is, right? So we know the methods that we can use to reduce nutrients. A lot of the challenge here is that it is a policy and a cultural challenge within the region, right? We've got an ag industry that is economically important to the Great Lakes that's kind of grown up and become massive in one way. But what we need is an agriculture sector that can do all that can produce all that food and do it in a way that is healthy for the lakes and doesn't create dirty water. So there are practices that you can use, whether it's, things like cover crops, rotational grazing, various forms of regenerative agriculture. And there's ways that you can run a more like conventional, what we might call an industrial row crop agriculture that both can stop that pollution from getting into our waters. And we really do need the states, to step up and do more to advance that, both on the regulatory side and the funding side in the coming years. I will say, I do try to be optimistic, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of progress on shifts on agriculture and water quality coming from the federal level in the next couple of years. It's really going to be something that we have to press on our agriculture states to take the lead on. I could talk more on that, Tom, but I'll stop for now.
Thanks very much, Joel. We do actually have a lot of questions that are coming in.
Sure.
Crystal, I'll turn to one about the volunteer experience. We had a question from a supporter whose daughter is a sophomore and wants to start an environmental club and is wondering if there are resources or ways that folks who are students can get involved.
For sure. First way I can think of, especially if a student looking to run a club on, relating to like environmental stuff. We have our I would check out our Great Lakes curriculum for activities for your group, but then in terms of Adopt a Beach, one way that school groups can get involved, and this is of course with the help of a guardian, for youth that are under 18. We do have you do have to have a parent with you at Adopt a Beach cleanups, but you're definitely able to run the cleanup. We just require that a parent is with you, and there are ways um, for sorry, I had a notification. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, basically school groups of folks that are under 18 are able to get involved, but there is a permission slip process, and we can work one-on-one together to get the form that you need, and other paperwork for that. But that is totally an option. So yeah, check out our curriculum and also get involved with Adopt a Beach if you have questions about how the permission slip form works. We can get in touch about that.
We have another question for Joel, which is about policy and the incoming administration. I know you touched on that a little bit in your remarks, and there's also been some questions about that in the chat. There's some additional ones that are coming in. I wonder if you wanted to maybe just get a little bit more deeply into that. The specific question here is, are there any issues that we've prioritized as a concern, and the relationship between the federal government and the Great Lakes?
Sure. I'll try to provide a brief answer. I do want to note that we've done a couple of webinars on like post-election, what's coming under the Trump administration type of things, and what's happening in the states. One of them we hosted back in December. I know that's up on our probably on our YouTube, Tom. And then I just participated in another one yesterday with a couple of my Great Lakes colleagues from the Healing Our Waters Coalition and the Environmental Law and Policy Center, because I know there was a question here too about other groups that we coordinate with. That's a good example of us coordinating with some other Great Lakes area NGOs. And that webinar is another good run through of like what to expect under this administration and Congress. Briefly, what I'm paying attention to the most, one, I'm looking at the funding and structure of Great Lakes programs. So things like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, water infrastructure programs that are highly dependent on, so that's be safe drinking water and, stopping sewage and flooding, highly dependent on both federal funding and regulation and also on federal personnel for their success. And so those are widely popular, bipartisan programs that have been very successful over the last decade plus. There is a stated intent by this incoming administration to look for places to cut both program funding and personnel. So we're going to be paying very close attention to that and boosting the voices of support for those programs from the region. I'm also going to be paying really close attention to the risk of environmental regulatory rollbacks that affect the Great Lakes. There are going to be some big national, court fights about various aspects of the Clean Water Act. We're going to be trying to pay really close attention to which of what I expect to see is a reduced focus on environmental regulatory enforcement from the federal side, again, putting more of the onus on the Great Lakes states to make sure that their individual environmental agencies are doing their jobs of ensuring that regulations are followed and that pollution is not increasing. There's a lot more to this, but I think that the approach we're trying to take is to be prepared, not to panic. Be aware that there are going to be some real challenges and some real risks to our environmental programs at the federal level. Also, though, that this region is one that where clean water in the Great Lakes are extremely popular issues. They tend to cut across political boundaries, and we have a track record of ongoing improvements and getting better over the last, I'd say, 20 years. That is something that we're going to be pushing. That message is something we're going to be pushing time and time again to make sure that we don't backslide on Great Lakes progress here over the next 2 to 4 years. And always looking for ways that we can continue to make progress in some of the areas that I mentioned. So I'll stop there and we'll share some. I know Tom's going to share some additional resources on that topic with you.
Thanks very much, Joel. Another question about volunteering opportunities. There's a question about, does the Alliance collaborate on community level events? Like would there be a way for someone from the Alliance to come and present to a group of youth, perhaps on issues like sustainability or invasive species or opportunities to advocate for the lakes? Crystal, I wonder if you could speak about some of the ways that ambassadors help with that process.
Yeah, so the Alliance, I believe we're I mean, I don't know if we come off as like a very large organization, but we're pretty small. I think we're like 30 people. So this is where our ambassadors really help with outreach. And so depending on location along the Great Lakes, sometimes we are able to have staff do presentations depending on the event, again, location. But yeah, like this again, our ambassadors are rock stars. And so if there is not a staff present, in the location, chances are we might have an ambassador. And our ambassadors all have a very good foundational knowledge about the Great Lakes, issues affecting the Great Lakes. And yeah, are pretty much well equipped to I wouldn't, give them a very specific presentation, but if we're talking overall like sustainability and like how that ties into the Great Lakes, we're able to prep them and yeah, and they would be able to do the presentation. And yeah, like I mentioned, we do in-person and virtual presentations. So that is definitely a possibility. And you can reach out to us and we can coordinate something.
Sorry, I was muted. We've only been using Zoom now for 5 years, and I still mess that up sometimes. I think we have time for maybe one more question. This is a question about Adopt-A-Beach and the volunteer experience again. There was a question about icy conditions, or conditions where you might not be able to go to the beach, which happens in the Great Lakes region, especially during this time. Is there a seasonality to the Adopt-A-Beach program? What happens if the conditions are inclement? Crystal?
Yeah, no, great question. So typically, our Adopt-A-Beach season can technically run all year long, weather conditions permitting. So we do typically have a increase, more momentum starting off in the spring once things start to defrost. So around March, a lot of folks go out for Earth Day to do Adopt-A-Beach cleanups. And then, yeah, everything from spring, summer is pretty a very busy time with Adopt-A-Beach. And even now, unfortunately, with climate change, the fall is a little bit warmer than usual. So we are able to go on a little bit longer um, in terms of doing beach cleanups in September, October. But yeah, when it comes to weather, especially when it's like, if it's like unexpected, let's say you have like a cleanup in the spring and, it rains sometimes and, let's say it's like really bad, like it is possible to cancel your cleanup if you have one scheduled. As the team leader, you are able to cancel that cleanup, and then our system is set up so that all your volunteers are notified of the cancellation. Yeah, so in terms of seasonality, really, it's as long as you are willing to go outside, you can do a cleanup. But yeah, like I said, right now with the cold, a lot of folks are not at the beach. So there's also not a lot of litter, which is good, but it's also, yeah. So I think right now is a really good time to start thinking about when you do want to go out to the beach and start scheduling cleanup, start thinking about who you want to take with you, and taking a look at our resources right now is a good time to prep. But yeah, I mean, as long as you can schedule a cleanup for like next month if you want, but it's gonna be chilly, so I don't recommend it.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, everyone who attended. We are really encouraged by how many people signed up and how many people joined us today. This was a very well-attended webinar. There's a lot of enthusiasm for the work in the chat or in the question and answers. We are very much looking forward to seeing you and joining with you in the work to protect the Great Lakes. There's some additional information, or there's a link that I shared in the chat. There's also an email address there, alliance@greatlakes.org, where you can send us questions if you had any that didn't get answered. There's also Crystal's email address there in the presentation. Feel free to reach out either way. But again, thank you. We really look forward to working with you, and please, we will follow up with a video and a link to the presentation. Feel free to share this far and wide to any of your networks. The more people we can get doing this work, the more impact we can make, and the more change we can see. So thank you all. We will be in touch.